Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
Mr. Putin, will you agree?
Thank you, press. Let's go. Come on, guys. Thank you, press. Let's go. Thank you, press.
Today, I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all, but we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax, but what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. We had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss. Again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. And welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to our weekly Cold War 2.0 with our dear friend Tarik Cyril Amar. Today is the 18th episode of this podcast. And hello, everyone, for those who are watching on YouTube, on Rumble, and on Ganjin Word. And a special thanks to our dear friend Red Access for moderating the live chat as usual. And we really appreciate his efforts to create the proper environment for the people to engage in respectful discussions and conversations. We do this for educational purposes, guys. So let's dive in. Tarik, there has been a lot of talk and drama about this Alaska summit. There was lots of criticism as well, which I'm going to bring to you during this conversation. But you argued actually against these arguments and against the criticism of this summit. And you said Putin meeting Trump at the Alaska summit is a very good thing. Evading diplomacy is a Western folly that Russia has no reason to imitate. Could you please walk us through your article? And also, why do you think this is a good thing? Because some people say, even those who believe in multipolarism, that the US and Russia are probably dividing the world into spheres of influence and not necessarily bringing peace.
Yeah. Well, first, maybe just to give people a sense of what this article that you have referred to very kindly was about. It was essentially saying that there are the usual voices in the Western mainstream media and in Western politics, of course, that hated the idea of the summit when it was still upcoming for the usual reasons, right? They just principally can't stand the idea of even talking to the Russians. They think, which is delusional, that Russia is isolated and that therefore if you talk to them, you break through this isolation. Newsflash, Russia has never been isolated, so it's irrelevant. And so on. Those guys we know, and none of us, I mean, not me, not you, and maybe also, I guess, quite a few people on our show don't respect these arguments because there's nothing to respect there. They're intellectually hollow. They are essentially information warfare produced by Western media and politicians. But what I was really interested in the article is something else, namely
Gesundheit.
A criticism, thank you, a criticism of this summit before it took place that came from a very, very different place, and a place I respect, actually, and I hope I made that very clear in the article, namely from people who are not Russophobic, who are not drinking the Kool-Aid of Western information warfare, and who believe usually in things such as multipolarity, and who have a very great and very justified distrust of the West, and in particular of the US. So more or less people like me and you, I would say, people who are realistic about how the world really is, right? And there it's a criticism, or there used to be a criticism, and probably is still there, that essentially said, when the Americans try to meet with the Russians at this level, when Trump tries to meet with Putin, it's a trap. And the Russians shouldn't walk into the trap. And then this argument had various sub-arguments, various variations. One was to say that all the Americans want is to freeze the conflict so that they can restart it later and then surprise Russia again with aggression, right?
Yes.
Which is not dissimilar to what happened to Syria on some level, Another argument was, while they're freezing that conflict, they want to target China, right? They want to have their back free, so to speak, to tackle another of their major competitors now. And then a third argument was essentially, and I think it's the most profound one, the one that argues most fundamentally, American foreign policy really never changes. It's made by deep state structures or an establishment, whatever you want to call it, the blob. And if Trump pretends that he wants a new beginning and really change the relationship to Russia, then that's either a lie, or if he is serious, if he is honest, it doesn't matter, because ultimately no president can actually go against this establishment, against this very deep continuity of American foreign policy, and that will always remain so aggressive toward Russia that every agreement that the Americans would ever achieve with Moscow, they would later misuse, right?
Yes.
I hope I've given a more or less fair, if very, very quick summary of some of the arguments of this school of thinking. And what I'm saying in this article is they're all right. This is all true, but I contest the conclusion. You know, there were really people, I would name them here, this is nothing personal, but there were people who were coming out and saying Putin should just not go, right? And sometimes they even the fear that he could be assassinated. I think that was really overdoing it, frankly.
Yeah.
That's why I don't quote it as a serious argument. But all the other ones I take very seriously. And my conclusion was the opposite. My conclusion is, yes, in essence, all of these cautions are correct. You're all right. There's no reason to be naive. In fact, one has to be extremely cautious dealing with the Americans, but we still have to deal with them. That is, the Russians are still right to deal with them.
Yes.
And my argument was that, first of all, we know that the Russian leadership, this is not the Russian leadership of the 90s. This is not the Russian leadership of the second half of the 80s, the long-forgotten Mikhail Gorbachev. These people are not naive. They are the opposite. They have learned these lessons. They are not giving free rights to the West. I would be extremely surprised if they did. And in fact, to be honest, they have a track record. They have an empirically verifiable track record of not giving the West an easy time. Because think about it. The whole war in Ukraine is happening because Russia didn't give in to the West. That's number one. We wouldn't have this war if Russia hadn't changed its attitude and was absolutely prepared to play hardball with the West if it has to. That's what this war is also about. Second, if Russia wanted to agree to a bad agreement for Russia, they could have done this for years. They could have done this with Biden, and they could have done this with Trump at the beginning very easily. He would have been so eager for them to do this. And instead, they held out and always insisted on their core principles and on their core war aims, and they've never given way. And you will see that even at this summit, now that it is over, they have not given way. In fact, we will speak about this in a minute, I think. It is the Americans that have, luckily, fortunately, and I think they're right, moved. It's not the Russians, right? there's a structural reason for this, apart from the fact that this is an entirely different generation of Russian leadership. The structural reason is that Russia actually has a highly professional foreign policy institution. Russia actually has foreign policy. It has a real foreign ministry full of experts, full of people who know languages.
That makes them more dangerous, actually, to the West.
Yeah, of course it does, and it should. They're right. But it also means that a game of diplomacy, even when it's played against a very devious adversary as the US, means that Russia has one advantage, which is that it's actually very good at diplomacy. This should not be overlooked. So sometimes from the people who were sort of warning, Russia, don't go there, they're going to trick you. I don't mean this in a nasty sense, but I almost felt they were patronizing the Russians. Like, you are so naive, they're going to get you. No, the Russians are not so naive. And if they go there, they're going there for reasons of their own. Yes. And the second thing is, of course, that I do think sometimes there's an emotional element here where people in the West, like us, who are very, very unhappy with Western foreign policies, right? Not only toward Russia, but also, for instance, towards the Gaza genocide and so on. We expect Russia to sort of constantly fight America, but we have to understand that the Russian leadership has a primary obligation towards Russia. This is how this world works. They do have that. It would be strange if they didn't obey that. And I can see scenarios in which it is in Russia's national interest to make an agreement even with a very unreliable US, because it's useful for Russia. And the last point I want to make, the people who were warning that if you make an agreement with the Americans, they will cheat you. Yes. They probably will, but the Russians know this as well. So they can make an agreement and stay on their guard. One doesn't actually necessarily exclude the other one, not with the guys who are now in charge in Moscow. That was the core of this article.
Nice. Just to respond to some of the commentators asking about me being ill. Yes, I have undergone surgery, guys. On Thursday, I rested on Friday. Today was, I feel a little bit better today. I have 3 holes now in my body, but I'm fine. And I wanted to do this live stream with our dear friend Tarik, because this issue is very important. I believe until Monday, this would have been already, new topics would come. And I really wanted to cover this case because there was a lot. Like, I've been reading and checking while I'm in the bed a lot, and Tarik is really making sense out of it. And since you, Tarik, mentioned the issue of the army of Russian diplomacy, right? Like the Russians have like an army of diplomats in this case. And I think, I think this makes them, as I mentioned, more dangerous and to the West. And this was quite obvious, for example, by none other than Bolton, the mustache guy. And he said Trump didn't lose, but Trump didn't lose, but Putin clearly won. I just wanted to show you his reaction to this meeting.
I think Trump did not lose, but Putin clearly won. Trump didn't come away with anything except more meetings. Putin has, I think, gone a long way to reestablishing the relationship, which I've always believed was his key goal. He has escaped sanctions. He's not facing a ceasefire. The next meeting is not set. Zelensky was not told any of this before this press conference. It's far from over, but I'd say Putin achieved most of what he wanted. Trump achieved a little. And I will say one other thing. I thought Trump looked very tired up there. I mean, very tired, not disappointed, tired. And we'll have to reflect on what that means.
You know, Tarik, besides this commentary, I also read a few commentaries of others saying Putin won because under Biden administration, the Biden administration didn't recognize the legitimacy of Putin. They even called for regime change, and now Trump is normalizing the regime of Putin. So this was also a personal win for Putin. We're not only talking about geopolitical or diplomatic victory, but also personal victory for Putin himself.
Yeah, look, what I find fascinating about comments like this, to me, they betray a total lack of professionalism on the side of those who make them. Because what do I care what this means personally, either for Trump or for Biden or for Putin? Are you serious, people? That's not the point. You can see how obsessed they are with their hostility to Putin, the individual, as if that's important for geopolitics. It's important. They feel that they've been done an injustice when they can speculate that maybe Putin can feel good about something that happened at the summit. This is what this is. This is ridiculous. I'm completely not interested in this sort of analysis. It's childish, right? If they want to talk with us about who got political advantage, if they think there is such a thing at this summit, out of it, there I can discuss. That's a category I take seriously. I might not agree with their analysis, but I can take their category seriously. But personal, just go away. Just get lost. I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
So to talk about more serious issues, right? Adult issues. Let's talk about political advantage. In terms of political advantage, I think it is true that, of course, for the Russian government, for Putin, this has been a success, right? But the success is not something that Trump gifted to them. The success is not something that the US has ever been in a position to gift to them. Because what this really does, what happened at the summit, it reflects what has happened on the ground in the war. I love the geopolitical analysis of a war that never actually goes back to the map and says what's happening on the battlefield, right? It's like, imagine somebody analyzed the Vienna Congress after the Napoleonic Wars. France is defeated, right? The victors in France are negotiating. And this observer tells you all the time, well, I have to say the French are really giving the Prussians and the British and the Austrians a big win there.
But why do you think that is the case nowadays, Tarik, with this, let's say, the intellectual class in the West? Really, I'm serious about
because
this.
The intellectual class in the West is what I would call politically narcissistic. I really mean this. They have been so pampered by what they thought was a unipolar moment, right?
Yes.
And what looked like a unipolar moment for a while, when they told themselves the story that we've won the Cold War and we rule the world, we, the West, actually rule the world now. They've been so pampered by that part illusion, part reality that is definitely gone now anyhow, that they cannot process that in a given political and military situation, they are actually on the weaker side. They cannot process it. They always imagine themselves without reflecting it. They don't understand this.
That's what I really wanted
as
to ask.
holding
Don't
all the
reflect at all.
cards. No.
Yeah.
They never understand when the other side actually has the better cards. And that's why they approach every negotiation as if everything was something that the West, in this case the US, can either grant or not grant, right?
Yeah.
And those who then don't like what in their eyes, in this case Trump, has granted, think he's doing that without any reason, but that's nonsense.
Yes.
The reason is that the Russians are winning the war. In fact, they have been speeding up their winning the war over the last week before the summit. And what Trump is doing, he's the first one on a major level, right? Of course, there were preparations for this. But Trump is now the first American president who has a realistic attitude to that fact, a realistic attitude to the simple fact that in this war in Ukraine, it went the Russians' way. This has happened. It's a real thing, right? It's time to acknowledge it. People like Bolton will never be able to do this. The imperial arrogance is so deep with them that they're delusional. They can't see the real world anymore.
And you wouldn't expect him to say anything but this, like to people like Bolton. What do you expect them to say except this?
The real scandal to me is that he's being asked. Yeah. No, really. I mean, we are still asking the same people who our media have been asking for years of this crisis and years of this escalated warfare, and everything they've said was wrong all the time. They started with promising everyone that we can just smash Russia economically. We do economic warfare, we call it sanctions, we just cancel SWIFT or something, and bam, regime change in Russia. Nothing has worked. The second big lie was, and they had this in several iterations, our military equipment is so superior that once we start giving the Ukrainians our tanks, rockets, planes, whatever, they will smash the Russians. The opposite has happened. Opposite has happened. I can remember very well that there was a point in the war when the West was delivering all sorts of tanks, like a nice mixed bag of tanks, which of course makes no sense anyhow. Some Abrams, some Leopard 2, no. And they asked Putin, what with the Western tanks? What's going to happen, right? And Putin said, and he was right. I'm sorry, it was a very, very, not sarcastic, but very dry statement. And he said, well, they will burn as well. And he's been absolutely right. They've all been burnt as well. And the F-16 didn't make a difference, and the HIMARS didn't make a difference. And if the Germans had decided to deliver the Damon Taurus missiles, they would also not have made a difference to the outcome. All that these systems have done is they every time increase the risk of escalation into World War III. That's all they did. Now, I will stop heaping up examples. There are many. But all of these things have been sold to us by exactly the same stupid, biased media talking heads who pretend to be experts that are now trying to talk about this summit. Why are we even listening? It's enough already, honestly. It's an insult to our intelligence.
But Tarik, well, for example, the Telegraph now admits
the Telegraph.
they admitted that Ukraine has lost this war.
I know,
right?
Which is very interesting. Yeah,
and they say Britain must now prepare for Russia's next onslaught. I just want to screen this article and read you.
There we go again.
Because this is what I do. Bring you the most ridiculous things in especially in the British press. The Brits are the best.
They're good at that.
They're really good at it, is it? So this article contends that Ukraine has effectively lost the war, with a settlement looming that favors Vladimir Putin. The article blames both Trump's transactional foreign policy.
Excellent wakey Telegraph.
Exactly. They blame Trump's transactional foreign policy, seeking to draw Moscow from China's orbit, and Europe's refusal to invest in its own defense. A Trump-Putin deal could dismember Ukraine and embolden further Russian expansion while America retreats from Europe. This article also warns that Britain and Europe must urgently build military capacity and prepare for hybrid warfare, as Russia increasingly seeks to weaponize inconvenience by sabotaging daily life. Without
nobody needs to sabotage daily life in Britain. Neoliberalism has sabotaged daily life in Britain for decades. They're done.
Daily life.
Listen, British submarine bases. This is a real story. British nuclear submarine bases in Scotland have just been found because of information freedom of information requests, essentially inside Britain, to have had some severe nuclear incidents recently. And I'm sure they've had them before that as well. And what is coming out is this picture of this rotting infrastructure around nuclear submarines. And you know what that reminds me of? I'm old enough. That reminds me of the very last years of the Soviet Union. Then in the West, we had the first TV crews in, and they were looking at their submarines and their harbors. And that was exactly the story we were getting. Look at this, nuclear submarines, and everything is rusting and decaying and so on. Well, they're done. Yes. And now you see it in Britain. That's where Britain really is. Growing child mortality in Britain and in France, growing child mortality. As Emmanuel Todd has rightly pointed out again and again, that is a massive indicator of immense problems and decline. So this whole idea that the Russians somehow are behind, wrecking Britain, nobody is behind wrecking Britain except the Tories and Labour. They've been at it forever.
That's true. Guys, before we move to the second part of today's show, today is going to be 45 minutes, by the way, just to answer to our dear friend. Yes, I have, I did the surgery. I'm fine. I'm tired, but this will also pass. Wir schaffen das heute, together with our dear friend Tarik. And by the way, today, in celebration of the Alaska summit between Trump and Putin, our dear friend Tarik is giving 50% off for the people who would click on this link. Yes. So if you go to the description, guys, of this stream, in the next 24 hours, you can get 50% on the Tarik's Substack subscription fee. And you could...
I should be precise, on the annual one.
And the annual one, yes. Yeah. So it is get 50% off on new annual subscription. So the link in the description below, you can all the time follow Tarik's work. He publishes also free, let's say, articles, but the ones that he puts it behind paywall, let's say, you can get this for 50% less if you subscribe it in the next 24 hours. Tarik, there is also something that I wanted to bring your attention, and that is the journalists who were shouting to Putin, "Will you stop killing civilians?" I was wondering if these same journalists would dare to yell in the face of Benjamin Netanyahu when it comes to killing.
Of course not. Of course not. And I mean, you're pointing to one of these enormous inconsistencies, hypocrisies, right, in the behavior of Western politics and Western media, which is that, I was rolling my eyes, but I don't want to be misunderstood. I take the loss of civilian life and the injuring of civilians extremely seriously everywhere in every war. And I'm not just saying that, right? That's one reason why I'm so angry about this war, because I know it was avoidable easily. Yes. And all of this didn't have to happen, not to speak of the many soldiers who died. But I have to say one thing, which is, if you look at the figures, you will see that the number of civilians killed by Russian military action, especially proportionate to the battle deaths on both sides, is small. It actually is small. I know that our media exaggerate this. I'm not saying that small numbers don't matter. Don't, people shouldn't caricature me as a cynic. That's not at all what I'm saying, but it's a fact that the number of civilians who die by Russian military action is small. And that has been true throughout this war. In fact, there are exceptions. We can talk about them. But in general, you can say that the sort of footprint of Russia's warfare shows clearly that they must be making a very serious effort to avoid killing civilians. I stand by that statement. That is very, very clear here. On the whole, there are exceptions, they occur, but on the whole, that's the pattern. And now you compare that with what the Israelis have been doing in Gaza, which is not war, which is genocide. The Israelis have not been waging war. That's
did you see this? Did you see this statistic, Tarik? This was published by Craig Murray. The percentage of child death, the percentage of child death in the Ukrainian conflict is 0.3%. 0.3%. The percentage of child death in the Gazan conflict is 37.7%.
And of course, that's one indicator, and you can take this to all sorts of others. You can look at the adults, you can look at the way that infrastructure is treated, and so on and so on. People have, just before the summit especially, there was a campaign in Western media, and it was very clearly a campaign trying to pretend that the Russians were systematically targeting civilians by their air warfare. That's not true. What is true is that the Russians have intensified their air attacks, and they've become probably a little more risk-taking about attacking, for instance, military structures or military production structures inside or very close to civilians. That may be true, but nevertheless, what this means is that for a long time, they were actually extra cautious about this. That is actually also true. And that even now, if you're fair about the figures, the Russians on the whole actually obey the law of armed conflict, humanitarian law that regulates more or less right? How you should behave in war and not commit war crimes. Now, the Israelis are committing genocide, so this has nothing to do with, avoiding crimes. It's actually looking to commit a crime as much as they can. And we know that the West is participating. The West has supported this. The British have supported it. The French have supported it. The US are really co-perpetrators. So who are we to actually do this and then try to criticize anyone in Russia for the way they wage this war? That's a completely immorally hypocritical position. I'm not ready to even discuss that with people. That is so full of lies.
But Tarik, the people of The Economist, they disagree with you. So this is the next, our next brilliant article that I wanted to bring to your attention. And this is the real collusion between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And I summarized this article. So this article basically contends that Donald Trump's indulgence of Vladimir Putin is not best explained by conspiracy theories or blackmail, but by a deeper alignment of worldview. Unlike his usual habit of punishing rivals and critics, Trump has consistently treated Putin with unusual deference, even during Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Instead of bluster, he offered plaintive appeals, revealing a faith in personal rapport that Putin repeatedly dismissed. This difference fits into a longer pattern. Trump has admired Putin since the 2000s, sought his approval and business ties, and benefited from Russian interference in the 2016 election. While the Mueller investigation confirmed that Russia worked to help Trump, it found no evidence of conspiracy. The controversy nonetheless consumed American politics and deepened Trump's bitterness. So, beyond vanity or manipulation, this article argues that Trump and Putin share a worldview that prizes raw power over international rules. Trump demonstrated this by recognizing territorial claims in the Golan Heights and Western Sahara, defying the U.S. principle against rewarding conquest. His approach to Ukraine seems to lean in the same direction. In this sense, the real danger lies not in hidden collusion, but in the mutual rejection of a rules-based international order threatening to destabilize global politics. It looks like the economists have become anti-imperialists all of a sudden. They reject the occupation of the Golan Heights by the Israeli occupation forces. What has happened?
No, they don't. They have never rejected the occupation. What they reject is that Trump has been rude enough to actually say, yeah, that's okay. You're not supposed to say it's okay. You're supposed to help the Israelis do it and be quiet about it.
Yes.
Look, what can we say about this? I mean, first of all, it's of course very interesting to see how in a very backhanded way, but not entirely, they have finally acknowledged that Russiagate was a hoax. Not entirely. They're still saying, well, he profited. First of all, the Russian interference that could actually be shown in the 2016 election was minimal. Yeah. It's ridiculous to claim that somehow decided an election. That's number one. Second, the main point was, of course, and they're sort of gliding over that the real claim of Russiagate was not that the Russians tried to do something. The real claim was that Trump worked with them. And they admit that claim didn't work out at all, right? And then, and here comes the real trick, they switch to, oh, you know what? Our Russiagate isn't so cool anymore. Now we talk about the fact that actually they see the world in similar terms. That's even worse, right? Yeah. And then they build this argument and they pretend that we have a rules-based international order, which of course we don't. No, I'm sorry. Excuse me, I'm done, right? It's Santa Claus. It's the Easter Bunny. It doesn't exist. Tell a Palestinian we have a rules-based international order. Try to do that. And, don't come to me. Don't even. If we cannot stop a genocide that has been going on for almost 3 years and is the most public genocide ever in human history, I mean every word. There have been bigger genocides, but this is the most public genocide ever in real time in human history. And we have in the West not only not stopped it, which we had to do actually, those were our obligations under international law, not to speak of morality. We have actually helped the perpetrators, right? And we have stood by every other Israeli
and punished those who wanted to stop it.
Indeed. Indeed. So there is no rules-based international order. I'm tired of hearing that. It is something that is invented every time something happens that has to do with power, but the West isn't profiting. Then suddenly we hear about the rules of the game. The fundamental rule of this type of thinking that you see in this Economist article is we give a damn about the rules as long as we win.
Yeah.
But if we don't win, we start talking about rules. That's it.
Yeah.
It's the most primitive, cheating, petty non-logic you can think of. So that whole argument doesn't interest me anymore. Is the argument that both Trump and Putin think that geopolitics has a lot to do with power? Is that the argument? Wow, I'm impressed. Oh my God. Both these people actually see the world as it really is? Wow, how rude. How can they do that, right? It's not discussable anymore. You know what I feel about things like The Economist? Again, I'm sorry I go on about this, but I really grew up in the late Cold War, and I remember the 80s. And I'm from West Germany, and we were looking at things like Pravda then, right? The Moscow newspaper. Or we were looking at Neues Deutschland in East Germany. And we were laughing. We were laughing because everything they wrote was like a dream. It had almost nothing to do with reality ever. We are like this now. BBC is like this. CNN is like this. This Economist article is like this. That's just not real stuff anymore. These people sit in a gigantic liberal centrist bubble and talk to each other.
Yes, they have created an echo chamber for themselves, and they talk to each other, and they I truly believe that they started to believe their own narrative.
Probably there is that effect, yeah.
Because the way they talk, especially when somebody like an outsider from this bubble comes and interacts with them, they truly try to look at you in a way like, are you crazy? Are you a conspiracy theorist? You know, like, those are the facts, you know. But Tarik, the last point I wanted to ask you, and this is about Ukraine. This is all about Ukraine. Now the Russian president and American president are meeting, and then it seems that Trump has called Zelensky to come to DC this week. This is according to Axios. Trump told Zelensky and NATO leaders that Putin is not just seeking a ceasefire, but a comprehensive agreement to end the war. According to a source, I think a fast peace deal is better than a ceasefire. Axios, Zelensky possible meeting with Trump at White House this Monday. In other words, Ukraine lost the war. Take Istanbul Plus route causes. I mean,
that's correct.
I don't want to make this sensational, but how many hundreds and thousands of people died in Ukraine for this moment, right? And this was not about Ukraine, and this was not all about Ukraine. And now Ukraine has to come and receive the results from the White House to tell them this is what we agreed. We are not sorry about your death.
And you know. First of all, I should add one thing. The Axios report was the first thing I saw about this particular development this morning. But it has been confirmed by now. There have been other very reliable sources making exactly the same point, and it is fundamental. And namely, that Trump has shifted his position to align with that of Russia. And he's right to do so. He's right to do so. The Western position up until now, and the Ukrainian position, has been to say, we must have a ceasefire first. And once we have a ceasefire, we can talk about things. The Russian position has been, we will not stop fighting. In other words, no ceasefire before we actually have a real peace agreement. Right? You can immediately see why these two sides are acting this way, because the Russians have the upper hand, the Ukrainians are losing, and what they want to do is basically the fighting should stop, and then we can talk forever. Right? That's what the Russians see. And then there are other aspects, such as during a ceasefire, maybe Britain and France and some other crazy people could introduce troops into what's left of Ukraine. All these little games. The Russians see all of this. It's not hard to spot. And they're saying, no. We are not doing this. If you want peace, you can talk about us, with us, about a serious settlement. We call that a real peace agreement, right? Where we really solve the issues, the borders, Ukraine's political status, neutrality, whatever, right? And if you don't want that, then you don't get an end to the fighting. It's a fairly straightforward position, and there's nothing wrong with it, right?
Yep.
There's nothing criminal about handling it this way. Now, the important thing that has happened at Alaska, and this came out only really after it was over. It was very interesting how this sort of trickled out. Axios, I think, was the first, is that Trump now stands on that position too. This is an enormously important break now in the Western position. If the Americans, if Trump sticks to this, then this is a fundamental turning point. I'm saying if, because Trump can be unpredictable. Maybe tomorrow he wakes up, Melania has had a bad dream, and something else is going to happen, right? But if he sticks to this, if he aligns on this specific key issue, this is like in chess. This is one position, but it decides. If he aligns on this key issue, peace over ceasefire with the Russians, if he sticks to that, then essentially that is saying the Ukrainians now must settle for what they can get, which is the reasonable way to end this war, by the way, and not some sort of crime. This is extremely important.
Yes. Guys, this is a weekly show we do with our different topic every Friday, but today is exceptional. We have done it on Saturday. Everybody is welcome to this show. All the opinions are welcomed, including those who disagree with us, and they can express their disagreement respectfully in the comments below. People who would like to come and make comments like this, like Lukewarm IQ channel, this is not a channel for you. You can go to some other channel where they fit your IQ level, so you can spread your comments.
Comment. It's mysterious.
Like this type of people. You can stay if you still can upgrade your IQ to participate in the comments. But if you can't do that, it's difficult for you. You can join many other channels and show your intellectual capacity there. I think that would fit you more. So for those who with the high IQ, those are the vast majority of this YouTube channel, I believe. Thank you so much for tuning to this exceptional stream today on Saturday. If you like this stream, the kind thing to do is hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And if you like to do more and support this independent work, you can become a patron, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis, or there are different means in the description below. And while we do that, we always like to thank our dear friend with Access for moderating the live chat, always in an amazing manner. Thank you so much, my friend. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning in on all the platforms, YouTube, Rumble, and Ganji work. And thank you to you, dear Tarik. And,
thank you, Kevork, and with Access too.
And we will see you guys next Friday with Tarik. I will see you on Monday, but with our dear friend next Friday. So have a great weekend. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.
Bye-bye.